Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Addicted to Success podcast. I'm your host, Joel Brown, and I'm here with a fellow Aussie and a really good friend of mine. His name is James Swanwick. He runs the alcohol-free lifestyle program, community. He also is the founder of Swannies, the anti-blue light glasses, and a slew of other businesses that he's launched over the years as well. And more than anything, you know, I've worked closely with James. James and I are in leadership in his alcohol-free lifestyle company, and he has impacted thousands and thousands and thousands of entrepreneurs, business owners, busy working professionals' lives. A lot of people are probably wondering, you know, what's all the neuroscience? What's the tools? I think we do live in a time right now where people love biohacking. They love to learn about personal development, and I love that you integrate not just living a sober life, but also the tools so that it's a lifestyle change, right? Because I do think that there are a lot of programs or communities that are very outdated, very traditional, and it almost blows my mind why they're not tapping into the biohacking and the neuroscience elements of it all. But for you, I'd love to get your perspective. You haven't been alcohol-free for your whole life, especially as an Aussie. We grew up in the same culture, and it's pretty rampant in Australia. So what would you say to someone that's listening right now? Because we do have a lot of entrepreneurs, executives, CEOs that listen to Addicted to Success. If they're sitting there saying, yeah, but you know, when I get home, I need to drink so I can relax. What would you say to somebody like that?
I get that you need to relax, but do you need to drink alcohol to relax? And sadly, cultural conditioning has us believe that alcohol equals fun, alcohol equals stress or anxiety relief. Alcohol is something we do when we celebrate, when we commiserate. We need it to create romance. And so I invite people to rewire their mindset around that. You can create romance without the alcohol. You can relieve your stress and anxiety without the alcohol. You can celebrate and commiserate without the alcohol. It's just that our social conditioning is such that we've believed that we can't for almost our entire adult life. And so I'm not here to hypnotize someone into not drinking, but I'm definitely here to dehypnotize them around the place that they have alcohol in their life. Because we tend to just worship at the altar of alcohol. And if I can change your mindset around that and maybe knock it off the altar, so to speak, and stop bowing down to it, then what gets to be released is what I would submit is our natural way of being. Clarity, joy, focus, great night's sleep, conscious communication. And that is just a superior way of living in my view.
Yeah, it's funny because I feel like a lot of people consciously know that the alcohol is no good, right? That's why they reach out to you. That's why they jump into your Project 90 program, which, by the way, 98% success rate. That's insane. We're going to talk about that. But look, someone jumps in because they know consciously they have a problem, but it's more so about what's happening on a subconscious level, isn't it?
Yeah. If we've lived our entire adult life with our parents, adult figures drinking around us, we turn on the Super Bowl and we look at funny beer commercials. We go to a night out with our friends and they say, hey, shall we meet at the bar? Let's have a few drinks. It's very challenging to try to believe that not drinking is fun because we associate drinking with fun and pleasure and joy. And so by natural extension, therefore, we feel like not drinking equals I'm in a prison or I'm dull or I'm boring. But I challenge that notion. I haven't drunk since 2010 and no one would ever accuse me of being dull and boring. You know, when I grew up in Australia, I grew up in a socially acceptable drinking culture, and I would drink 2 or 3 drinks most nights of the week. I'd drink heavily on weekends, but I never got arrested. I didn't get a DUI. I didn't wake up in a ditch. I wasn't what society would deem to be the traditional alcoholic. However, I identified that almost 2 decades of drinking, seemingly innocent 2 or 3 drinks a night for 18 years, was compromising my health, my experience of life. I was irritable. I was 25, 30 pounds overweight. I wasn't sleeping great. I was envious of people. I was irritable, stressed, anxious. I was just blah. I felt like a 5 or a 6 out of 10. And thank goodness that I found the way to stop drinking, and not just quit drinking, but stay quit from drinking, because it's been almost 15 years now, because my life has just transformed in positive ways more than I ever could have imagined.
Yeah, look, it's interesting you say that, because how old are you now?
I'll be 50 this year.
Yeah, and you don't look 50.
Thank
right?
you.
You look fit, you look healthy, you're switched on. I saw your before and afters. You know, you can see it online, guys, especially on your Project 90 website, alcoholfreelifestyle.com.
Yeah.
You know, and you'll see that, the before and afters, and it's true. I know, because I used to drink a lot. I used to be a DJ when I was younger, and we used to sneak Grey Goose vodka bottles in our record crates into the club at 18, because remember in Australia, we're 18 when we start drinking.
Yes.
In America, it's 21 and up, right? And I just couldn't wait to drink. And I used to put the bottle of vodka in the record crate, sneak it in, and then the club promoter would give me a $300 bar card. So I'm sure you could imagine what that's like. I have my own vodka. I can go and get orange juice and mix it and have almost, it felt like unlimited drinks. Plus, I would shout women drinks at the bar, and I was the man. So I had like a triple tie. One was I could DJ and feel confident. Second thing is I was young and I was just itching to party up. Third thing was I had a bar card and I was the man and the girls loved me, you know. So imagine that, trying to get out of that cycle. And what I would say is the big shift for me was realizing when I started to take my business seriously, I continued to hit this like roof, this ceiling, this upper limit. And no matter how much I tried, I wasn't switched on enough to be able to do the work I needed to do. Like, it killed my productivity.
Yes.
I was also feeling like I was taking a loan out of the bank, my energy bank, and I was having to pay it back day by day. You know, Monday to Wednesday, forget about it. It was a write-off, you know.
Yes.
I'm sure you've probably spoken with a lot of entrepreneurs like that.
Yeah, it's interesting. We speak to many high achievers, entrepreneurs, executives, CEOs, business owners, realtors, attorneys, physicians. Alcohol doesn't escape any profession, I have to say. And most people describe to us that they feel like a 5 or a 6 out of 10 compared to what they know that they could feel. Now, as a financial ROI, if you are drinking a couple of drinks a night, that will disrupt your sleep. It'll have you feeling foggy and distracted the following day. It'll have you feeling irritable. Maybe you snap at your wife or your husband. You're not as present with your kids, and you carry that into your workday. And that shows up not making an additional sales call, not hiring the person that you need to hire, procrastinating on some strategic choices in your business, not creating an additional revenue stream, chasing a sugar hit around lunchtime or the mid-afternoon because you're feeling so tired, and looking forward to being able to drink more of the attractively packaged poison that we call alcohol when you get home that day after 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock. And then this cycle continues, and that shows up at a 5 or 6 out of 10, meaning hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenue or income that you do not generate because you're operating at a 5 or 6 out of 10. For entrepreneurs who are very financially motivated, I ask them, how much money did your business make last year with your drinking habits the way that they are? And they say, oh, let's just say hypothetically $1 million. I go, okay, so at a 6 out of 10, with you feeling tired and irritable and with your drinking habits the way they are, you made $1 million. Yes, okay. So if you stop drinking alcohol and you were alcohol-free now for many months, and for the next year you remained alcohol-free, and you were feeling like you were an 8 out of 10 or an 8.5 or a 9 out of 10, do you feel like you'd make more revenue or income in your business? And they say yes. Or say, how much more? And sometimes they'll say 400,000, $1 million, $1.5 million. And I say to them, well, okay, then your drinking habits are costing you $400,000 to $1.5 million every single year. And when you look at that over the course of a decade, that could mean $10 million in revenue and income that you don't generate. It could mean $5 million, $20 million, $100,000. It can mean your marriage. It could mean your relationship with your children. So there is a definitive loss of return when you consume attractively packaged poison.
That there just, I'm sure, shocks a lot of people when you say it like that, because it's shifting their perspective right now while they're listening to it probably. Because I was speaking with someone recently that had reached out to work with you at AFL. And I was having a conversation, and I actually, jump in and have conversations with those that are in James Project 90 and Beyond 90 groups. And he was saying that I just love the taste of it. And I threw him through a loop because, I care about him. I'm like, hey, buddy, like if we really think about this, alcohol is ethanol. Would you agree that it's ethanol? And he's like, yeah, I can't disagree with that. And I say, so, if we went down to a gas station and I poured ethanol out of the gas pump into a fancy glass and put a little bit of sugar or some fermented flavors in there, and then I added ice to it, you wouldn't drink that, right? And he started laughing. He goes, of course I wouldn't. I said, yeah, because it's meant for cars and rockets, not the human body. And it's as much as people can hear that, there's something much deeper that's going on, right? There's this, would you call it like an emotional pull that's happening? Because you can cognitively understand and hear the information. And I think that that's one of the biggest problems that I see, not just with living an alcohol-free life. It could be a porn-free life, or it could be a drug-free life.
Yes.
So you can hear all the information in the world, but if you haven't integrated and shifted something, you continue to act out based off the feelings that are happening within your subconscious and your body, right?
Yeah, when people crave a drink, they're not really craving the drink. They're just craving feeling different than what they're feeling in that moment. They just want to change their state. And the thing is, you can change your state a million different ways that do not require drinking alcohol. It's just that the cultural conditioning has set it up that that's the way that we've chosen. And that's the way we've been doing it for years and decades. Logically, it makes no sense that you would drink ethanol. It makes no sense that you would do this. And yet there are smiling assassins all over the world. And a smiling assassin is a waiter or waitress who's smiling as they offer you a drink. It's your friends who are saying, can I get you a drink? Would you like a drink? It's a very nice and hospitable host who is well-intentioned when they offer you a drink when you come over to their house. Can I get you a wine? Can I get you a beer? But these smiling assassins are serving you straight poison. And because they're smiling as they do it, and other people are smiling, and we associate this ethanol and this alcohol with joy and connection, it becomes very challenging for us to break that cycle. But the reality is, we don't want alcohol to change our state. We just want to change our state. And we can do that so many different ways than drinking attractively packaged poison.
And what's beautiful is you show people that it's possible, right? And in turn, they get to save their marriage. They get to rebuild their relationships with their kids, because some kids become estranged from their parents. They don't respect them. They don't want to talk with them anymore. They've seen them drunk, or they've seen them just, rolling over on a New Year's Eve or Christmas Eve or Christmas Day. And it's hard to come back from that for some kids, because they want to look at their parents as role models, right? And also some employees look up to their bosses and managers and CEOs and executives. They sometimes can put them on too much of a pedestal, right? So, what do you say to somebody that they've had alcohol in their life for probably longer than any other relationship, right? When you think about it, a lot of people do start drinking in their teenage years, and some of them are, 45, 50, 60 years old now, and they might even have a marriage that's only 15, 20, 30 years old, but they've been drinking for 40, 50 years. I get it's really hard to break away from it, because it's like a toxic relationship, right? It's like it lies to you and it tells you that you need it to be confident or to relax at the end of the day or whatever it may be. But when you try to break away from it, it's like the claws are in you and it's holding you back, right? So what is it that someone must do to actually make a change? Is there like a decision that's made? Is there a readiness? Like, what is it? What do you think it is?
Most people who come to us have been pondering stopping drinking for years, if not decades. And often it can be a rock bottom moment. They get a DUI, their wife or husband says something, their daughter, their son says something to them, and that triggers them. More often than not, it tends to be the drift of life has got to them. They've been drinking for 10, 20, 30 years. The pain of that mediocrity that they feel from not being the best role model for their kids, from not being present for their husband or their wife or their partner, for seeing the drift of life get its claws into their business or to their career. Suddenly, after years, sometimes decades, it reaches this point where it's like, okay, I must simply change. I have to change. And it doesn't have to be this big dramatic moment like waking up in a ditch, getting the DUI, getting into an argument. It can just be, I've had enough of this. I can't do this any longer. And for many of our members who join us, most of them are over the age of 40. The average age is in their 50s. If you're in your mid-50s, you may at best only have 20, 25 years left on this earth. That is frightening. The average age of death for a man, I think, is 74, and for a woman, it might be 78, as it is presently. If you're 54, you got 20 years left. If you're anywhere in your 50s, you might only have 20 years left. And so the question is, do you want to keep living this way? Craving a drink, sleeping poorly, feeling irritable, not being present with your husband or wife or your colleagues or your children. Someone said it to me recently. Success is having your kids want to spend time with you. They proactively phone or text you. That is success. But when you have adult children who don't want to spend time with you because in part of your drinking, that should be a huge wake-up call.
Well, yeah, and even if your kids are no longer living at home with you, because I think some people maybe in their 50s, 60s, 70s, their kids have moved out, and then reality starts really setting in, right? Because it's like, well, now it's just me and my partner. Or they go through a divorce and they're single and they're like, what the hell am I going to do with the last 20, 30 years of my life? And it's a big reality check. And so I'd often say, when I'm talking with people that also want to become alcohol free at that point, I'd say, do you want to enjoy the golden years ahead of you?
Yes.
Or do you want to be burdening your partner or living in worry and fear, right? Less than who you actually are, because now you've got all these health complications.
Yes.
And it goes down very quickly. People don't understand how quick your health can decline, especially 45, 50. Things don't function like they used to. They're not as efficient. And you said before something about rock bottom. And often when I hear people say, I'm going to wait for my rock bottom, I'm like, why would you do that? That's crazy. It's like drinking, when we really weigh things up, it's such a liability.
Yes.
And I said to an entrepreneur the other day, you would not accept this liability in your business. If an employee was tearing you down, wasting your time, killing the productivity, gossiping at work, slowing things down, you would not put up with that, would you? And he said, no, of course not. I said, so why do you let alcohol do this in your life? And he's like, it's just like this, the decisions I'm making, I'm starting to realize, Joel, that I'm going down the wrong path.
Yes.
I said, the alcohol has been making the decisions for you. You keep telling me you want to be successful, but what is success? What is it? Give me your definition. And he shared, it's to live a good quality life. And I said, well, you got to start making better quality decisions. And alcohol is the one that's like a puppet master pulling your puppet strings.
Yes.
Are you noticing this too?
Yeah,
with a lot of
absolutely.
entrepreneurs?
I hear a lot of high achievers say, I'd do anything for my kids. I'd do anything for my family. It's like, really? Okay. Would you quit drinking for them? Let me think on that. I'm like, what is going on in the world? Yeah. If your family gets to benefit from you being clear and focused and energized and happy and filled with joy, surely you would just do the strategy that creates that. And in this case, it's letting go of alcohol. But it's such a toxic friend, and it becomes so familiar, this toxic friendship, that it's almost like a comforting blanket because we've known it for so long. We've had this friend for so long. We start to ask ourselves, well, who am I without this friend? Who am I? Who will I really be? And that can be a very challenging identity shift for people as well, because if you've been known your entire adult life as John or Lisa or Sally or Chris, the good time person, the drinker, I have my nice fine wine, I have my scotch at the end of the night, the concept of you not consuming that is so unfamiliar and so different that often we just choose to stay in the status quo, even though that status quo is compromising many areas of our life. We have it all backwards in society. Honestly, we do. We celebrate drinking poison, and we mistakenly, I would submit, believe that not drinking the poison is going to be dull, boring, difficult, challenging. Like I said, I haven't drunk since 2010, and my life is so much better because of it.
Yeah, I believe you. I just know how different I feel after cutting alcohol out. I was speaking with someone a couple months back, and he had gone through your program, through Project 90. And I asked him, because he was going to AA for about 4 years straight. And he said, Joel, the difference is when I was in AA, I was constantly suppressing the feeling of alcohol. He said we were constantly talking about it. It was like ruminating in his mind for years, right? And he said, look, that's all I knew at the time, so I just kept going, right? And he said, but I was always in recovery and always talking about how I'm in recovery. And he said, I was so scared about the drink that's around the corner. Like if I slip up or what happens, right? And he said after he had actually gone through your support, work with the coaches like Coach Victoria that works with you as well, and a couple other coaches as well.
Yes.
He said, now that I've been able to actually disconnect from my relationship with alcohol in a way that he was able to do it through the neuroscience tools, he said it's like his thoughts, feelings, and cravings and attraction have fallen off a cliff. And he said, what I realized I wanted all along without knowing it until after the fact was that I wanted freedom of thought. He said, now I don't think about alcohol. He said, I don't even talk about it anymore. If I ever do, whenever it leaves my lips, it's because I have full power over it and I feel so good and I'm in momentum and I never want to go back to it. And it's funny because you probably felt like this too. Have you ever been in a toxic relationship?
Yes.
Right. So, and I can't assume I have too. I can't assume that everybody has.
Yes.
But maybe if it's not a toxic, like let's say romantic partner, but a toxic friendship or toxic business partner, someone that's just done you wrong and terrible personality, then they got work to do. Now, when you turn around, say 5, 10, 15 years later, and you look back and you think, I would never be friends with that person, or I would never date that person. The person that I am today would never do that. It's like an old life, or it's like a past life, right? And like that's how it feels towards alcohol when you're actually able to shift what's happening in the subconscious, right?
Yes. This is where I think the traditional modalities for stopping drinking are mostly ineffective. So, for example, AA is very much surrendering to a higher power. It's lamenting the past, but most importantly, it's focusing on what not to do. Don't drink. I need to stop. I've got to be sober. I'm sober. I'm in recovery. I'm an alcoholic. Now, I submit that that is a very ineffective way of trying to get long-term power over your drinking. And what we do, certainly at Project 90 and at Alcohol Free Lifestyle, is what I would suggest is the exact opposite. We have people choose the lifestyle that they desire. It's not saying no to alcohol. It's not saying I'm powerless. It's saying I'm powerful and I'm choosing this lifestyle, an alcohol-free lifestyle. They've done a lot of studies of the human mind which shows that if you tell yourself what not to do, the mind only hears the thing that you're telling it not to do, and you tend to do that very thing. So when we say, don't drink, I need to stop, I've got to be sober, I'm sober, what are we focusing on? We're focusing on the alcohol. We're focusing on the drinking. And then we tend to do that. The analogy is if you're skiing down a mountain and you say to yourself, don't steer towards the trees, don't fall over. And often we steer towards the trees and we fall over, even though we've just said don't do that. And that's why I would submit traditional modalities like AA, although effective for many people, are mostly ineffective for most people. Over here, we're choosing this lifestyle. Tonight, I'm going to drink soda water ice and a piece of lime. I'm going to have the most fun being alcohol-free tonight. And we're choosing this direction. We're telling ourselves what we will do. And guess what? It becomes very simple to do that.
That's so powerful. What's your favorite chapter in your book, Clear? If you could pick just one, which one would it be?
It's probably one that you wouldn't think, and that is the uncomfortable reality of your new clarity. So what I suggest in the book is that once you are alcohol free, it's not necessarily sunshine and rainbows immediately. What tends to happen, and what I've seen anecdotally over the years coaching folks, is that when they first stop drinking alcohol, now all of a sudden, yes, they have this clarity, they have this focus, but the clarity can bring you towards the idea that maybe I'm in the wrong marriage, or maybe I've chosen the wrong career, or maybe I'm not taking a path here that is really serving me. And the prospect of ending the marriage, the prospect of changing careers or starting a new business or pivoting and shifting can feel very uncomfortable because it's change. And humans don't tend to like change. It feels very unsettling. So my favorite chapter is that chapter because if you can navigate that uncomfortable period where it does feel challenging, and you can be courageous, and you can lean into the resistance, and you can take the action that you desire to take anyway. It may feel like you're running through rose bushes and you're getting all cut up and bloodied and you've got thorns, but then when you come out the other side, it's like, wow, now I've really made transformation. Wow, this is amazing. This is a whole new way of living. I feel joy, clarity, focus. I'm sleeping well. I have conscious communication. I've finally been brave enough to go after what I truly desire, as opposed to 2-3 decades ago when I only did that thing because my parents told me to do it, or my society told me I should think this way and believe this way and act this way. That's where the true freedom comes from. So it can be uncomfortable to go through that process. It can be. But on the other side, it is beautiful.
Yeah. I guess at some point, someone has to burn the boats, right? You have to say, you know what, I'm ready. Enough is enough. And really, I say, don't draw the line in the sand, draw it in the cement. You know?
That's a good.
Say, hey, I'm not coming back. Yeah, I'm going this direction. And it's interesting because a lot of entrepreneurs are so good in their business at doing certain things. You know, they made that like defining decision. They said, enough is enough. And they've crushed it. Business owners, busy working professionals have asked for that pay rise, or they've got that promotion. But when it comes to the alcohol, it's like, that's the thing that's dragging you down. You know, that's the thing that's the boulder you're holding behind you that you continue to try and lug along with you. And you wonder why you're slowing down. I had Tony Robbins' team, and I know you've gone to quite a few Tony Robbins events lately as
Yes.
well. You're big on Tony too. And I know Tony Robbins' team reached out to me and asked if I could help promote tickets to UPW. This was like quite a few years ago. And
Unleash the power within. That's what UPW stands for.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And so anyway, I spoke with a few other of my friends that have podcasts and other things going on, and they said that Tony's team reached out to them too. And I asked a member on his team, why are you reaching out to us, you know? And she said, well, you know, Tony's really trying to reach the younger generation. And something clicked in me. I love the psychology of marketing, love the psychology of branding and success and all of that, right? And I thought about it and I thought, as big as Tony is, he's incredible. Rocks stadiums of tens of thousands. He'll keep going until he can't anymore. He still values staying relevant in the space. Yes. Staying relevant in people's minds, staying relevant with his success. It's part of our human nature. And then when I hear business owners or entrepreneurs, busy working professionals that are drinking the way they do, I'll often challenge and ask, like, are you okay with becoming irrelevant? And they hate that question, but they also love it too, because it wakes them up to realize the more they drink, the older they become and faster they degenerate. You become degenerate. And I said to him, have you noticed that a lot of the younger generation aren't drinking like your generation is? And I want you to imagine that you're playing I asked, would you say business is a game of sport? And a lot of them agree, because they love that. They're high achievers. They're competitive. They say, yeah, it is. Say, so what happens when you keep going out on the field, but then you've got new subs on the bench that are younger, faster, more productive than you that don't drink? How are you going to keep up? And it's an eye-opening thing for them. It's very awakening for them.
Yeah. Always be learning. ABL. I love that motto. And so I'm going to be 50 this year. I love going to personal development programs, doing courses, reading new books, listening to podcasts. I love being challenged on my beliefs because it opens me up to new ways of thinking and new opportunities. But if you're in your 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and you're already feeling like you're stagnant or you're stuck, you are going to get taken over. And Tony Robbins speaks about this concept. He said it used to be 30 years ago that if you did good work, then you would be compensated pretty well. And if you did very good work, you'd get compensated very well. And if you did excellent work, you'd get compensated, in an excellent fashion. But he said today in the modern world, with the whole world opening up and the internet, and now you can hire people in countries who are much more cost effective, and they are learning AI and they're learning all these new things. If you do good work, you get slaughtered. So if you're a middle-aged business owner or an executive or a physician or a doctor or an attorney and you're doing good work, you're going to be obsolete very, very soon.
I believe you.
If you do excellent work, you may only be compensated and rewarded very well. But Tony Robbins says this: the difference between doing excellent work and outstanding work is only 2 millimeters. It's only doing a little bit extra or thinking a little bit smarter or giving yourself just a little bit more of an edge than someone else. And in those 2 millimeters between excellent and outstanding, that's where all the rewards are. That's the highway, the freeway, where you get joy, clarity, focus. You get millions of dollars as opposed to hundreds of thousands of dollars. You get connection. That's where it is. And I would submit, if you are still choosing to drink alcohol, you're not going to get to that outstanding level. It's impossible because you're drinking toxins. And that is going to compromise your sleep, which is going to compromise your outlook on life, which is going to compromise your energy, which is going to compromise your outcomes. And so to be outstanding, to stay relevant, and to continue to support your family and be loving and engaged, it's just 2 millimeters extra. And in this analogy, stopping drinking is you getting that additional 2 millimeters.
So, when people hear, just stop drinking, for some people, they feel it's pretty tough. I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of somebody that's listening that's like, hey, you're asking me to give up something I've been doing for so long. So what's your beef with white knuckling? Mm-hmm. Where do you see that being a problem? Because a lot of people say, well, white knuckle, I'll do dry January, or I'll stop for a little bit. And sometimes people do stop for a few months, but they end up going back into the cycle. So why does white knuckling willpower not work, would you say?
Well, willpower and white knuckling is the most ineffective strategy of them all. I've been researching all of the different ways that people have been trying to stop drinking for the past 10 years. And what I've found is that AA has less than a 10% success rate. In fact, there was studies that came out in 2012 that suggested that the actual success rate of AA, when you look at it over the course of a year, is 7%, which means a 93% failure rate for most people who attempt it. I would submit the reason for that is that you're lamenting the past, you're being stuck in an identity that you're surrendering to a higher power, that you're an alcoholic, that you're powerless over this disease. That doesn't work for people. That is ineffective. Rehab, less than a 10% success rate. And then the most ineffective of all is willpower and white knuckling it. Now, when you're white knuckling it, when you're using willpower, you feel like you're in a prison. And what do all prisoners want to do? They want to break out of prison. Which is why these 30-day challenges like Dry January and Sober October are ineffective long-term. Effective short-term for the 30 days, yes, but ineffective over months and years and decades, because we go into these 30-day challenges depriving ourselves of joy and pleasure. We associate not drinking with pain and drinking with relief and fun, which is why when we get to day 30 on these 30-day challenges where we've been white-knuckling it and using willpower, we just want to celebrate. We want to break free from that feeling of being so tense. And how do we want to celebrate? By having a drink. And then the slippery slope gets us and we return to the same frequency and quantity of drinking that had us somewhat inspired to do these 30-day challenges in the first place. So willpower and white knuckling it can work in the short term, but it is completely ineffective over months, years, and decades.
Okay, that makes sense. I guess it's like, do you ever remember using maybe a Microsoft Windows computer back in the day, in the early 2000s, late 90s? Do you ever remember getting a virus on your computer?
Yes, yeah.
Right. So let's say you're sitting there, the virus pops up, your computer's going haywire, things aren't working the way you want it to, it's not efficient. If you press the power button and turn the computer off, and you wait 10 seconds and you turn it back on, is the virus still there or is it gone?
Yeah, well, I would submit it's probably gone in the short term, but it probably will come back in the long term.
It's still there.
Yeah.
It's still sitting inside the
Yeah.
software of the computer. So I guess with what you do with the Project 90, my assumption, just seeing how this plays out, is it's like running a recode on that software so it removes it, and then you might even upgrade the software so it performs better. Is it fair to say that that's a neuroscience process? Because I know sometimes people hear neuroscience and they think, whoa, it sounds technical, but there's something magic about it in the sense that it really does shift something on a deeper level. Because as a coach, I do a lot of subconscious repatterning exercises, and I work a lot with the subconscious to heal trauma, wounds. And I do find it's really powerful because in the subconscious, this is where all the habits are coming from, right? The programs that we might have adopted from childhood or teenage years. And so we want to shift those patterns. Would you say that this is probably a good way to explain what's happening with someone that's trying willpower alone?
Yes. And it's mostly a shift in identity. So the identity of a drinker is, I need alcohol to relieve me of my stress and anxiety. I need alcohol to be fun. I need alcohol to get to sleep at night. I need alcohol for connection, because otherwise, what are my friends, family, colleagues, and team members going to think if I'm not drinking? Are they going to think I'm an alcoholic? Are they going to think I've got a problem? So we have this identity around, I'm a drinker. That's just what I do. That's what I've done. But if we can shift that identity to, I am a growth-minded, conscious man or woman who is a family man or a family woman, who takes care of his friends, who's powerful, who considers himself or herself a professional sleeper, who lives a life of appreciation instead of expectation, who's no longer envious or jealous or irritable, but now powerful, appreciative, and giving. And we can shift the identity from that to this, then the belief system changes, therefore our actions change, therefore our outcomes change. So a lot of the shift that we do here in Project 90 using the neuroscience is to help identify folks the identity that they've had for many, many years, decades, be brave enough to make the shift in identity, help them make that shift, and then embody this new upgraded version of them. To use your analogy, we're now putting new software in the system, which now gives us different outcomes.
That's awesome. So let's say someone's hearing this and they say, okay, that sounds great. I want to learn how to make those changes. I want to learn the neuroscience tools, but they have fear coming up, right? Because that's what it ultimately comes down to at the end of the day. Readiness, and then on top of it, the fear of, hey, I'm stepping into new territory here. So how does somebody navigate that? They know they really want to, and they look at their kids and they see their kids want to look at them as a role model, and they're looking at their bank account. They're going, I know that it's on me and I'm losing money. There's a lot on the table. But they still have the fear of changing because maybe their friends are drinking. Maybe they just have never gone this path before. Maybe personal development's new to them, or even community's new to them. Like, what do they do in that case?
Back in 2010, when I decided to quit drinking, I remember I was sitting in an IHOP, which is an international house of pancakes outside of Austin, Texas. And I was sitting there. I'd had 2 Bombay Sapphire gin and tonics the night before, and I was feeling a little hungover. And it dawned on me, what am I doing in an IHOP? And I thought to myself, I must take a 30-day break from alcohol at least, just to experiment, just to see. So when I went into this, I went into it with the idea of, I'm just going to run a test here. I'm going to run an experiment. And that was palatable enough for me to begin. I didn't draw a line in the sand and say, I'm never going to drink again. I said, I'm going to go for at least 30 days. Not 30 days, at least 30 days and see what happens. Now, I had a lot of that pressure in the first week or so. I remember I went to Los Angeles a week after I stopped drinking as part of this first 30 days. And I went to the Jones Bar on Santa Monica Boulevard with my friend Zach and Tom. And I was so nervous that they were going to give me a hard time when I told them that I wasn't drinking. And they did. Not only did they give me a hard time, but my friend Zach went to the bar to get me what I requested, which was a soda water. And he came back, gave it to me. And as I went to sip it, I saw him and his eyes were kind of like looked a bit guilty. And I looked at him, I said, did you put vodka in this? And he went, oh, yeah, I did. And I was like, what are you doing? Like, I told you I wasn't drinking. So that was a pretty eye-opening experience for me, that my good friends, my best friends, were not in alignment with me not drinking. So much so they were trying to get me to drink. So that felt scary and eye-opening. However, thankfully, I was strong enough to go the distance, and I got to that first benchmark of at least 30 days. I lost 13 pounds. Because of the clarity and the focus and the energy, I was able to audition to become a television host on a show called Sports Center on ESPN, arguably the most iconic sports TV news show in America.
Yeah.
And I got that job, and I credit that to the clarity and focus that I had from being alcohol-free. So I started to gather this evidence that not drinking was actually serving me in a far better way than drinking. And then increasingly, I just became more confident. And I let go of this social stigma where people were judging me. In fact, I was single at the time, and I went out on a couple of dates. And initially, I was very concerned that my dates were going to be judging me for not drinking, think that I was a party pooper or dull. To the contrary, they were like, oh, you don't drink? Oh, that's interesting. Tell me about that. And I could sense, and they told me that they were impressed with the fact that I wasn't drinking, because most men who asked them out would take them out for drinks. I was meeting them on a Saturday or Sunday morning for a walk or a hike, something that didn't necessarily involve alcohol. And so over that first year, I really cemented this belief that, in actual fact, I can get more out of life. I can enjoy life so much more by choosing to be alcohol-free. And all of these concerns and fears about friends, family, and society judging me were all nonsense. The big secret really is that nobody really cares if you don't drink. They just care if you're pleasant to be around. They just care if you're a good person with good morals and values, and if you're fun. And I can have the most fun being alcohol-free. So I would just invite anyone who has resistance around that. I get it, because you've been exposed to probably decades of cultural conditioning with smiling assassins everywhere, smiling as they offer you a drink. I get it. And any successful person knows that success is standing on top of a cliff, looking down and seeing rocks, not seeing a safety net, but taking that leap anyway and stepping off and trusting that the safety net will appear. And I promise you, from my own experience of being 15 years alcohol-free, the safety net will appear, and your whole life will transform positively because of it.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I love that testimony. That's really powerful. I can definitely attest to that. I feel like my status increased when I stopped drinking.
Yes.
You know, you show up more powerfully, especially in business. You know, you want to be somebody that has more bandwidth, because then you have more output. You can generate more, create more, and that brings more back in. And you can create more impact if you want to talk, you know, on a higher level. Contribution goes to the next level too, because there's more of you to offer rather than what alcohol stole from you, right? And I often, when I talk with entrepreneurs, CEOs, because we have this conversation about the choices they're making with the alcohol, because a lot of the time they've sort of diluted their mind thinking, well, yeah, I've been able to do really well with business. And they just think that because they drink with clients, they will and wow them, or what are the boys going to think? That's because I'm successful. And I'll say, you really think a drink has made you successful? Like, are you really that weak or low performing in your actual self that you think a drink actually props you up? And they're like, no, everyone knows deep down inside it's not the drink, right? And I was having this conversation with an entrepreneur recently, and he said that when he stopped drinking alcohol, he likened himself to a Lamborghini, right? He said, well, imagine I'm in a Lamborghini, and on that Lamborghini, the taco on the Lamborghini can go 250 miles an hour. And he said, I thought I was a Lamborghini. He said, I was hanging out with the boys. I thought I was a hot shot. And he said, when I stopped drinking, I realized I was only going 60 miles an hour. I had a governor on my engine. And he said, now that I don't drink, he's like, I can keep up with the young bucks. You know, he's like, I'm way more wittier. And so that's what it is. You know, you're listening right now to Addicted to Success, the podcast, and you have this drive, this passion to achieve more. Why not let go of the boulders, you know, and see what happens? Like, what have you got to lose? Reach out to James and say, hey, James, let's do 90 days together. Just focus on the first 90 days and see what that looks like. Because if you can shift the programs in your subconscious, which in James' program, 98% effective, I mean, that's insane. Then that means that there's something else available to you that you probably never tapped in. It's like, who could you be without it is the big question, right?
I'll tell you who most people are with it. They're a driver of a car with their foot on the pedal, on the accelerator, while simultaneously having their foot on the brake.
Oh,
So they're applying all of this energy and this exertion for the car to go fast while simultaneously pushing down on the brake. That's what's going on when you consume alcohol. And I'm not saying put your foot down further on the accelerator. I'm saying take your foot off the brake. And alcohol is the brake. Remove the brake and watch your life accelerate in so many ways. And it doesn't necessarily have to be financially, although it can be. It could mean you're the best role model for your children. You're the best partner for your spouse. You're the most giving, loyal, open, amazing, impactful person for generations to come. Because make no mistake, your children are watching your habits and they are being affected by your drinking habits. I don't know of anything else that can be more impactful on a family than supporting someone to give up drugs, including alcohol. I don't think the president of the United States can make that much of a generational impact. I don't think a lawyer can do it, or a judge, or a police officer, or a fireman. If you can help someone get off drugs, including alcohol, it not only transforms their life, but it transforms their children's life and their children's lives. And it impacts your staff, your team, your colleagues, the Starbucks barista who you order a coffee from each morning. Imagine if you show up open at a 9 out of 10 when you order that coffee in the morning, as opposed to you're in a hurry, you're in a rush, you don't look at the barista in the eye, you're kind of very short with him or her, and you just go through life like a headless chicken, running around, irritable, stressed, anxious, annoyed. Remove that alcohol. Take your foot off the brake and allow your natural perfection to shine through, and that is open, responsive instead of reactive, happy, well-slept, conscious, loving. All of those things is what happens when you take your foot off the brake and allow the accelerator of an alcohol-free lifestyle to come through.
I love all these analogies. I feel like a lot of people that are drinking right now are driving around with their check engine light on. They know it, right? All the signs, the signals, the flags are going. When I speak with successful individuals in their career, and then when they tell me about all the problems they have with alcohol, especially those that are married, I always ask them, like, do you want to be a burden in your relationship? You know, like, I often challenge them to think back to when they first got together, whether they were married or they first started dating. And I ask them, like, who are you before that all came into play, before you had the troubles and all that, the alcohol being a wedge between you and your partner's intimacy, right? And they'll almost change their tone when they talk about it. The mood changes. And they're like, oh, yeah, I used to be like this and this. And I'll ask, like, where did that person go?
Mm.
You know, did you drown that person in the alcohol? Like, are they sort of brainwashed now into thinking they need it? And you see relationships improve. And sometimes people think, no, I have to drink because my partner drinks. That's probably a big one that you've probably heard a lot. Like, oh no, that's when my partner and I have fun. But would you say that people are drinking to fill the void because they say, I'm bored, so I drink, or I'm lonely, so I drink, or it's what I do with my partner. What do we do in this case?
The discomfort of the dissatisfaction that people feel about their life is often what leads to their drinking. They're numbing themselves, or they're procrastinating on a tough decision that they have to make. Listen, marriages have been saved countless times as a result of one of the partners stopping drinking, even if the other one continues drinking. And the thing is that we mistakenly believe that drinking is what is creating connection or fun in that marriage or in that relationship. Nonsense. Remove the poison, even if it's only one of you. That person will now bring themselves up to a higher level. They'll be more conscious. They'll be more loving. They'll be more responsive instead of reactive. There'll be less arguments, less irritation. And then the other person who's continuing to drinking may not agree with it or like it in the short term, but they will very soon get on board in alignment because they will see and experience and feel their partner living life at a much higher vibration and a higher energy. And if they don't, then it can get tricky because maybe the person who's quit drinking realizes that the gap between the two of them is so vast that it's irreparable. And that has happened. I mean, we've had people quit drinking in this program. I remember one woman named Lisa. I won't reveal her final name, her surname, just to protect her identity. But she was on about day 61 or 62 of not drinking in our 90-day stop drinking process. And she announced on a group coaching call that she realized her marriage was over. And she said that night she was going to sit her husband down and have a conscious communication with him. And she did. And in the days afterwards, she came and she told us what happened. And she said that she told her husband that their marriage was over, and it was one of the most challenging conversations that she's ever had. And she knew that it had to happen. Fast forward 3 years later to today, she's now absolutely flourishing. They did get divorced. She has moved on. He's moved on. But she now started an argan oil business. She runs these retreats for nurses now, which is giving her a lot of joy and a lot of fulfillment. She started dating again. She's incredibly happy with her life. She just realized that 28-year marriage had to end. And that's kind of comes back to that chapter in the book, which is the uncomfortable clarity of your new reality, where it may not feel like sunshine and roses in the moment, but it can completely change the course of someone's life for the better, even if it feels really uncomfortable and challenging in the short term.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I was speaking with a guy, he owned a winery in Napa Valley, and he was on the fence. He looked at his life, he looked at what was going on, he knew something needed to change. He ended up jumping in with you guys. He jumped in the Project 90.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I think it was beyond 90. He was in for the whole year working.
Yeah, nice.
And and I asked him, I'm like, it's so interesting because you're sort of in this conflict right now. And he eventually sold it off. He said, we're selling it. He said, I just can't have it on my conscience anymore, even, selling these drinks to people and being a part of this process. He says, I know when I heard James say it's like pretty packaged poison. He says, I know it is. And he said, this is my start of my journey to making a change and U-turning. And I thought that was really powerful. For somebody that owns a winery or someone that owns a liquor store that sells it off, or whatever they do, shut it down and they end up, doing what they need to do. It shows you that, if there's a will, there's a way,
Yeah. Just going back to what you said, he was sitting on the fence. The problem with sitting on the fence is that you get a sore bum. So I say to people, get off the fence.
Yes.
Like if you've been pondering drinking or pondering stopping drinking and you've been sitting on the fence for a while, you get a sore bum. Get off the fence. Get off the fence and take action. I always say this, life is not about watching from the stands. It's not about watching people on the court from the stands. It's about getting on the court and playing. And too many of us have been sitting in the stands watching others for years and decades. It's time to get on the court. That's where life happens. And I get it's scary, and I get that it can feel challenging. And I get that your whole identity has been you as a drinker. But time for a new identity. Takes me back to when I first moved to the US, actually, in the early 2000s. I joined the Los Angeles Rugby Club, 2002 to 2004. I wanted to make new friends, and I played rugby growing up in Australia. And if I was, quote unquote, lucky enough to win the MVP each Saturday, if there was a game, my reward from my fellow teammates back at the Sharkies Manhattan Beach bar in Manhattan Beach, California, was I got to chug beer out of a dirty rugby boot while all of my teammates were yelling, chug, 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 and skull, skull, skull. And, you know, I liked that identity, candidly. I was the Australian. I just arrived to the United States. I wanted people to like me. They associated an Australian as a larrikin. And so I really stepped into that identity and gave it to them, which was, oh, yeah, I'm James, the funny beer-drinking Australian. Yeah, watch me drink beer from this boot. Watch me skull, watch me chug, watch me get drunk. Ha, 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 let me make some jokes. And then the next day it's like, oh, geez, I've had a few last night. Ha, ha, ha. And the Americans would go, oh, you got to meet this crazy guy, James. And the Americans loved it. They loved this identity. And I loved that they loved this identity until I didn't love it. Until I got to 2010, where I'd been drinking by that stage for 18 years. I was 35 years old, and it caught up with me. And as I said earlier, I was 30 pounds overweight. I was tired. I was irritable, mediocre in my business, poor sleep, envious of other people, jealous. I remember my parents in Australia would phone me for a catch-up call, and if I saw them calling me, I'd go, oh, God, my parents are calling me. It's such an inopportune time. They always do this, and I'd screen the call. That was what I was like when I was a drinker. And then when I became a non-drinker, I became so much calmer. And I stepped into this new identity of health conscious and vibrant and energetic and likable and friendly. I didn't need to drink beer out of a rugby boot in order to create friendships and connection with people. And when my parents would phone me from Australia, as a non-drinker, I would go, oh, my mum's calling. I'm going to take the call. Oh, my dad's calling. Okay, I'm going to connect with my father. That's the difference.
This has been playing on my mind for a while. I do notice a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of successful business owners, professionals, they tend to have an all or nothing type of personality. You know, it's very black or white, and they can't stop it. It's very hard for them. And it's a great superpower to have in business.
Yes.
Sometimes people have that because they might have some ADHD patterns. Some people have that because it's just the way that they have repeatedly achieved success. So they start thinking that way with everything.
Yes.
And they may even pick up things like, you know, I've got a cup of coffee, but I know for myself, because I'm that type, I'll just have one coffee and not 3 or 4 a day, because I don't want to rely on external things to drive me. But would you say that this can tend to play out quite a lot with high achievers, that they tend to use the external things as coping mechanisms, and they just haven't learned how to actually use healthy things as mechanisms to be able to, you know, drive them forward?
Yeah, high achievers are all or nothing, and anything that they do, including their alcohol consumption. So they're all or nothing. Right. They go in and then they use alcohol to numb themselves, maybe sometimes to give them energy to deal with their stress and anxiety. And so they're running around like a headless chicken in many cases and consuming this attractively packaged poison because it's go, go, go. And this is the only way they know how to either relieve themselves of the stress and anxiety of the go, 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 or to actually generate more energy depending on what time of day they're consuming it. But imagine if the high achiever can redirect that, let's call it OCD or ADHD, they can redirect that focus and that energy from consuming the poison to choosing much healthier habits, focusing on nutrition, exercise, conscious communication, consider themselves to be a professional sleeper and take the actions that really protect and celebrate their sleep. Their whole life would open up, I would submit. And I've seen it repeatedly because our clients are high achievers. They're CEOs, they're executives, they're business owners, they're doctors, they're attorneys, they're salespeople, They're very successful people. And the success that they have generated in their profession and in other areas of their life is because they have ADHD qualities, or because they're OCD, or because they're born this way, or they've learned this way. And if we can just subtly shift from reaching for this alcohol, which is definitely putting the brakes on our success and our enjoyment of life, and we can redirect it to these healthy habits, and then we just absolutely explode in all areas of our life in the most positive, beautiful way possible.
Yeah. Yeah. I know I have the 5 genetic markers for ADHD, and I know one of the things I noticed, and I never use it as an excuse. I always look at it as, hey, well, what's the superpower here, right? What's the positive in this? How can I use it for good? But I do know when I looked back at the times when I was drinking, binge drinking on weekends or whatever it may be, I noticed that it took me days to recover. I was making just poor decisions. I found it really hard to operate during the day, low energy. I actually had a lot of anxiety and worry out of nowhere, just irrational anxiety because of alcohol. And I do know, I've looked a little bit into it, that if you have ADHD or any of these sort of patterns, that alcohol is like one of the worst things you can do for it, right? Because it just sends everything haywire.
We mistakenly believe that drinking alcohol reduces our stress and anxiety. However, it increases our stress and anxiety.
Yep.
And pretty soon we get to this point where we're drinking alcohol to relieve us of the very symptoms that alcohol is creating. And then we get stuck on this vicious, perpetual cycle. Oh, I need to drink to relieve myself of the stress, but then the drinking is actually creating the stress. And then I need to drink to relieve it, but then the drinking is actually creating it. And if you really break it down, alcohol is a time suck. You're thinking about drinking, preparing for drinking, recuperating from drinking, lamenting and pondering the drinking, then preparing for drinking, recuperating from drinking, and on and on and on it goes. And if you are a high achiever, a business owner, an executive, a physician, an attorney, a lawyer, a doctor, or whatever, that is a time suck. And not only is it a time suck, but it is a joy suck, because you are stuck on this vicious stop-start cycle that you cannot get off unless you finally say enough is enough.
Yeah, it robs you of your time, your money, and your energy, right? It's like every second that goes by like this here on earth is gone forever. You can't get it back. And that's what it does. When you're having to sleep for another couple hours for the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday to catch up on what you did on the weekend, those hours could have been put somewhere else more productive, right?
And even if productivity isn't your goal or your vision, it robs you of your connection with your family. Because a lot of these high achievers create immense success in their career and in their community and amongst their friends, but they're also acting because behind closed doors, they're not connected to their spouse. Their kids are drifting from them. They're not present with their kids. They know they're not being the best role model they can be. So not only is drinking a time suck, a money suck, an energy suck, but it's also sucking the joy out of your family. And that will show up in your grandchildren's lives as well. If you're compromising your kids' lives because they're observing you drinking, and then they take up drinking habits that are similar to yours, then their kids, your grandkids, are most likely going to be observing that behavior of their parents and then take up the same drinking habits. So you have an opportunity right now to stop that generational shift or stop that generational impact of the negative consequences of your drinking by just saying it stops here. The generational pain of drinking stops here. There's actually studies that suggest that if you had a parent or a family member who had an alcohol use disorder, you actually have a 50% increased risk of having an alcohol use disorder. However, we can't hide behind that and say, oh, well, I'm a drinker because my dad was a drinker or my uncle was a drinker and they had an alcohol use disorder, so therefore it just runs in the family. No. It's true that you have a 50% increased risk of that. However, from what we now understand from epigenetics, we can actually change the expression of our genes through positive lifestyle choices and environment. And when I say an environment, I don't mean an AA meeting, because you might have gone to an AA meeting and you're sitting next to a 19-year-old meth addict who's holding up a gas station. How can you relate to that person? Of course, we support that person in their journey, but if you're a high achiever and you're well educated and you're articulate and you are celebrated in your community, but you've got this one problem of drinking alcohol, you don't want to be going to an AA meeting, hanging out with people who you can't relate to. You want to be in a like-minded community. And that's what we've done here at Alcohol Free Lifestyle. We've created a like-minded community of CEOs, executives, entrepreneurs, business owners, realtors, physicians, attorneys, successful people, but they just haven't been able to break the back of this one thing, alcohol.
Yeah. Yeah, what I like about your community within Project 90 and Beyond 90 is that it's not about shame. It's not dwelling in the past. It's about moving forward together, right, with people that are like-minded. And as a coach, I know that your subconscious needs evidence in reality. It needs reference points of seeing other people like you that are also breaking those patterns, that are disassociating away from alcohol so that you're not craving it anymore or thinking about it anymore. And that actually builds what we call, or even strengthens what we call, the web of belief in your subconscious so that you disassociate harder. And that way you're just not going back to it, right? It's like, again, like the old person you used to date and you're like, you see me, you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I was ever attracted to you, you know? And I think a lot of people feel that way to something like, you know, cigarettes or weed or whatever they did in the past. And they're like, I can't see myself doing that anymore. It's just not there. It's like something died in them and they just can't go back to it. So that's key. And so 98%, that's pretty big. That's like, how did that come about?
The University of Washington did a scientific study on our 90-day stop drinking process in 2023, and the results were a 98% reduction in drinking amongst the participants. Now, if you compare that to AA, which has a reported 7% success rate, 98% sounds pretty damn good. One of the world's leading addiction experts, his name is Professor David Bellin out of Cambridge University, and he read the study report. He described it as groundbreaking. Now, we've tried to work backwards from here and try to figure out what is it that makes this process so successful when the traditional modalities of AA, rehab, and willpower, by comparison, are completely ineffective, at least long-term. And part of that reason is a like-minded community. So it's not a community, it's a like-minded community of people that you can relate to. There's a New York Times best-selling book called The Power of Habit by Charles C. Duhigg. And in that book, he says, change becomes probable when you have people with a common goal, but in a like-minded group of people with that common goal. So when you go to an AA meeting, yeah, you've got the common goal of stopping drinking, but it's not a like-minded community. Whereas here in Project 90 and Alcohol-Free Lifestyle, and much of the reason why I would submit there was a 98% reduction in drinking from the study participants was that those study participants went through a group of like-minded CEOs, business owners, attorneys, doctors, physicians, high achievers, retirees. When you put people in a like-minded group with a common goal, change becomes not just possible, probable.
Yeah, I do know the neuroscience shows that group support is the most effective way to drive that deep behavioral change.
Yes.
Right, that's what it's about. Yeah, it's tough doing it alone. We're not meant to be lone wolves or feeling like aliens, you know, in our own little worries by ourselves. So that's very powerful. And I know you even have people that come back that have graduated from Project 90 or Beyond 90 that come back years later that share with the rest of the group their testimonies of how they're continually moving with momentum and they haven't come back to drinking, which is really powerful too. I think people see that and it's like it's a template of hope. They say, oh, yeah, that's possible for me too. Why not, right?
One of our graduated members, his name is Steve Wilt. He's out of Akron, Ohio. He's a financial services manager. He's late 50s, and he went through the program in 2022. He is still alcohol-free today. He stopped a 40-year drinking career when he joined our program. Now, he thought that he was going to go 90 days and then possibly do moderation. He's still alcohol-free 2.5 years later. In fact, he did a TEDx talk recently. You can find it online if you type in Steve Wilt TEDx talk. You'll see Steve talking about his journey through our Project 90 Stop Drinking process. There's another woman, Jessica Gaines, who's a realtor out of Louisville, Kentucky. She stopped in December of 2018, still alcohol-free today. She said her hair has got better. She's got rosiness in her cheeks. She's calm. She's peaceful. She's generating better clients in her real estate business. Not necessarily more clients. She didn't want more clients. She just wanted better clients that weren't causing her as much stress. And then you've got John Keltner, who's a financial services manager out of, I think it's Folsom, California, somewhere in California. He quit in November of 2018. He's still alcohol-free. His reasons for joining Project 90 back in the day were to be reconnected to his son, who was 13 at the time. He found that he was disconnected. He was 25, 30 pounds overweight. He wasn't happy. He stopped drinking with our process. He had to get slightly smaller glasses because he lost so much puffiness in his face. People started calling him the soda cran man because he'd always go to a bar and order soda water and cranberry juice instead of what he used to drink, which was vodka and cranberry. And now he's coached his son's basketball team, has an amazing connection with his son, who's now, I think he's 17 or 18 years old. And then he just got married to the love of his life about 18 months ago. And he is just flying in life. So this is not another one of those 30-day, 90-day stop drinking programs. This is a lifestyle change. This is a style of life. We're not, I can't drink for 90 days. I can't drink for a year. I've just got to go for a year. This is, you're choosing a lifestyle with joy, clarity, focus, conscious communication, great sleep, happiness, joy, the body that nature intended you to have. You don't need a six-pack. You just got to have and look the way that nature always intended you to look and feel. That's the lifestyle we're choosing here. We're not saying no to alcohol or being sober or being in recovery or trying to get clean. All of that verbiage is outdated and ineffective. We are choosing this beautiful style of life.
I love it. No more labels, right? It's just, hey, we're changing our lifestyle here. It's very powerful. That's an empowering way to live rather than labeling yourself as, recovery or I'm in recovery or I'm an alcoholic. Look, this has been such a great conversation. I feel like we could just go on forever. There's so many things. I know that if somebody, let's say they're on the fence, as you said, you get a sore bum when you do that, but they're really sitting there and the fear's coming up. It's like there's a forest right now, right? And on the other side of the forest is all the things they want. They want to have the clarity and, that great connection with their partner or the successful business that they take to a whole new level or a great relationship with their kids. To me, it sounds like with Project 90 or Beyond 90, it's like they're standing at the foot of the forest and you can't go around it or under it or over it. You've got to go through it. You get to go through it, but you're going to get through that forest, walking the path with people like you and all the coaches you work with that have done it over, 2,600 or something times before, 2,500. It's a lot of times you've done it with a lot of successful people.
I've been helping successful people to quit drinking since 2015.
Yeah, so a decade, right? But the thing is, it's like your team has the map, the flashlight, the compass. They know how to walk it, and there's a group that walks with you. But it's really about saying, I'm going to take the steps now, right? It's being ready to just take the steps to get to the other side of that forest. I use that all the time with everything we do in business and life. So place bets on yourself. Step in and say, I'm ready for this change now. You deserve it, right? That's what it's about. But there is one caveat. You don't get in life what you think you deserve. You get what you negotiate, right? So you got to negotiate this and say, I'm ready to step in because, I just know that there's so much more I could be tapping into.
Alcohol is your worthy opponent. Pray for a worthy opponent because in conquering it, you get to level up. You get to go within and find the way, make the way, overcome the obstacle, go over, around it, underneath it. It doesn't matter. But the obstacle gets to be removed. Initially, the obstacle is the way. It's the worthy opponent. But then once you go over, under, around, go through, like I said, it may feel at times like you're running through rose bushes, getting bloodied and you got little thorns. But when you come out the other side, an alcohol-free lifestyle is far superior than an alcohol-fueled lifestyle.
Excellent. Yep. And if you want to jump into Project 90 or Beyond 90, go to alcoholfreelifestyle.com/Project
90.
Project 90, that's right. And you have a whole video there.
Yeah.
People can watch it. There's testimonials. There's a frequently asked question that you eventually get to look at as well. Look, this is going to be one of the greatest decisions someone can make in their life, especially if they've been holding this boulder for so long. So, I'm praying that, whoever's watching this right now, Maybe this is your sign, your signal, your whatever it is, your God send, that, the whisper of wisdom that's coming to you right now. I know a lot of people say that to me, like, oh, I feel like I prayed for this and it's come, or I've been talking to my friend about this. I've been thinking about it for so long. So make today the day. Why not step in and make it happen? One last question.
Yeah.
I'm not going to let you off this easy. My last question, this is for everybody on the podcast. I asked Tony Robbins this, Matthew McConaughey this, everybody, right? Question is, if you were to deliver your last 30-second speech to the world, what would that last 30 seconds sound like?
I've had a life with alcohol and a life without, and without is far better. Choose an alcohol-free lifestyle for yourself, for your family, and for the generations of your family to come.